I've actually been questioning my belief system because of everything that's been going on. And I've started to question whether God isn't real. And I've been searching. It's not an easy task.
No.
It's daunting.
I went to the EU. I had no idea the monstrosity in Brussels.
Oh, yeah.
The size of it. I was shocked. It's so huge that I think, this is so instantiated now. I can't see how to disassemble it. I mean, it's a large monster. It's definitely a large monster.
I've looked at how can we make sure that this never happens again. Why was it even possible, right? And he looked inside himself because he thought, well, maybe I did something wrong. And there were people in his immediate environment that said, this all happened because we stopped believing in God.
Nice to meet you, Gino.
It's a very big pleasure to meet you too, Tammy. I've seen you in Rotterdam, but this is the first time we actually talk. So I'm honored.
Uh-huh. Oh, it's nice to meet you. And this is a good opportunity for me because I don't get to talk to politicians in the Netherlands very often.
No,
and I'm very interested. I watched you in Parliament one day giving a speech, but that's the only introduction I've had to you so far. So if you would just introduce yourself and tell my listeners exactly what you've been doing, where you are, what you're up to.
Well, it's the simple questions that always get you, but I'll do my best. So my name is Gino Luurssen. I'm Dutch. I'm 31 years old. I live in the Netherlands. I also work there. I'm a politician. I write opinion articles for a online newspaper in the Netherlands, and I have a background in education. I've been questioning and pushing back on the globalist net zero diversity movement since about 2017, and it has cost me a lot of friends and loved ones, but it has been a journey of truth, and I do think I do not have another choice anymore. It's a difficult journey for some, but it has been one of truth, and I'm continuing to question and push back on the narrative that has been sold in the EU, in Canada, in the United States of America for so long now. And that's what I'm doing now.
Okay. Well, I'm very curious about how the net zero is going over there, because it's a crazy idea. It will never come true. So it's a pipe dream.
It is a pipe dream, yeah.
And I know that you guys are coming to an election in November, is it?
November 22nd.
Yeah, and so
it's going
how
to be
many people do you think are still in your parliament interested in this, thinking that this net zero is a good idea?
It seems like the over majority of people still believe, at least believe that there's a climate problem.
Right.
And there are the major parties in the center and from the left, they actively push it. So they're like climate activists. There's even a new thing going on where the European Commissioner, Frans Timmermans, which has been like they call him the climate pope, but he has been the front runner of the Paris Agreement, which is, of course, the agreement that is underlying this whole net zero thing. And he is actually coming back to the Netherlands to form a front between several leftist parties to push this thing through. So it's going to be very, very interesting and very important elections. And I'm hoping people will make the right choice. I'm not saying that, or at least that they start questioning whether the whole narrative is one is it realistic? Can we actually manage it without costing too much, right? Because that's like the realistic approach. And the second approach, of course, is how much of what has been told is actually true. Well, that's a very deep discussion, and the truth is a hard thing to grasp, but at least let's look at it, because there are a lot of scientists that have been speaking out against this narrative, right? They've talked, okay, 2050, we cannot reach that without pushing down on everything and regulating everything.
Well, even Patrick Green, I think, was the co-founder of Greenpeace, and he's speaking out against it now.
Yeah, and this the physicist who won the Nobel Prize in 2022 even speaks out against this. He's being cancelled on social media, obviously, but that there is a turning of winds, and hopefully we'll be able to reduce the damage of these policies.
But I think when you talk about this net zero Pope that you're talking about, that just shows how religious this whole idea is. And when you're talking about belief in something, then it's not reasonable, so it's very difficult to fight against.
It is. It's good that you say that, because there are some people who so fervently believe, like a belief system, right, in the climate narrative, that even if you talk to them about certain data and facts, that they just reject those things as not being true, because there's one narrative, and that is the way, and it becomes very hard to even have a reasonable conversation. Yeah, it almost looks like a form of religion, right?
I think sure it does. What about those guys that put their hands in cement?
Yeah.
You know, what about those guys? That's pretty. That's
zealotry, right?
That's zealotry. That's right.
Zealotry. Yeah, so they go the full mile, and even I think Greta Thunberg has got a doctorate in theology. This is not something I make up. I think this is actually true. So they might even be confirming that it is religion. Who knows? It's a crazy world.
It is, yeah. World. Well, I was baptized when I was a child, and I went to Sunday school. But then, like almost all Westerners, I rejected the church when I was 13 or something, But now, further on in my life, much further on in my life, I've come back to it. And it was, it was a miraculous undertaking for me, because I was very ill. And I had accepted that the doctor told me I was going to die. And then when I went home to tell my son that I thought I was going to die, and I looked at him, the love I saw for him made me realize that it wasn't up to the doctors whether I lived or died. It was only up to God. And I can't, and that's about as well as I can explain it. But these beliefs that people have, and then the true belief that we have of our transcendent, these are such mystical and elusive ideas that it's no wonder it's causing us trouble.
It's no wonder indeed. And I think that we are maybe in a form of a spiritual battle between beliefs.
It looks that way.
I think it's also ideas and it's also facts, but I think far deeper than that. It's a battle, like Douglas Murray talks about the culture war, but I think there's an actual spiritual war even deeper down. And you talk about being baptized as a child. I was raised atheist, and
as many Dutch people, right? We're also atheist, or at least secular.
Yeah, true. I think the over majority is either atheists or proclaimed atheists because they have been raised maybe Protestant or Catholic, because although the Protestants are in the majority, but a lot of Dutch people that do not believe in God and actually reject the idea altogether, and maybe even the values that underline Christianity. I think the biggest group of people in the Netherlands right now that hold fast to the Judeo-Christian ideals are the Muslims, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it just shows how close we are to the Muslims.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, we are. But it's kind of interesting that the Muslims are far more conservative and far more relying on the morals of the Judeo-Christian story than the actual Dutch people are. But yes, I've actually been questioning my belief system because of everything that's been going on. And I've started to question whether God isn't real. And I've been searching. It's not an easy task.
No.
It's daunting.
Mm-hmm.
I question, because there's so much information, right, between the different denominations, between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. I do not know what the right way is, but I have stepped down from the belief that there's nothing there.
Right. Yeah, and I think, Douglas Murray is in the same camp. He's also stepping down from the belief that there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So
I'm certain that there is something, and I'm afraid that it is God. Because if you have to accept that that's true, that's such a huge step towards the unknown and the known, and in a certain part because of the Bible and the things that we've been teaching all these generations, but also that there's something so much bigger than you, and it's quite existential to say the least.
Yes. Well, we all have very large egos in the West, and we think that we're bigger than everybody else. And it takes quite a bit of humility to let go of the ego. It's very, very strong. And we're taught that in our schooling system too. We're taught that we will be able to do whatever we want. I mean, that's a lot of what the young people are taught now, is that they can go and be whoever they want, especially young women. You can be whoever you want to be. And this self-will is just so strong. And that's what blocks you from the humility that you need to listen. And this is kind of what I've been talking about and learning along with Jordan on the road while we've been speaking in all these different places, is that we have forgotten how to listen to each other. Mm-hmm. And that time of being present when you're in conversation with someone and you're listening without formulating your next question or trying to undermine what they're saying, but actually listening, that's where you can be inspired or to understand or to learn something new. And so I think these days in politics, people, they want their way and they want it now. And there's nothing that they will accept except for what they want because they're right. Yep. It's so immature. It's so crazy. There's no listening. There's no negotiation. And if you don't negotiate, you can't get to a place where there's a dance or there's play or there's movement forward in understanding. Anyway, that's what I think.
Well, that's a very good analogy. I think that a lot of people, they behave kind of, I think your husband talked about this too, about like they're acting in the world as if they're a 2-year-old and forcing the way they see the world as the way the world is, which is of course not entirely true, because you negotiate reality with other people and you try to find out what works right?
Yeah, that's right. And I guess that's what you're doing in Parliament.
Yes, well, that is what it's supposed to be, right?
And how does that go?
Not so well.
No, eh?
Because, no. The idea, because Parliament was once thought of as the battleground of ideas, right? With all the voices within the room, whether that's the House of Commons or the House of Lords, it doesn't matter. You have this debate ground where you tug and you pull and you push with ideas till you get to a certain as close to the truth as you can to make policies that hopefully it doesn't fix everything, because that's very difficult, but does the least amount of harm to everyone, and you try and solve, like, stumbling forwards to make the world a better place. And that is what in idealism it should be. But what happens now is this party politics. It's different from the United States and Canada. We have a lot of parties and they work together in a coalition, which is, of course, working together isn't a bad thing. But what sometimes happens is that before even the debate starts, the choice has already been made. So you can bring forth the best arguments you want. You can be very critical, but if the majority wants to go a certain way, you do not have a chance to really steer away from that. That doesn't mean you should stop going to debates, of course, but it has been proven very difficult to really have a realistic, well-grounded conversation with the Greens, especially on the climate agenda, because they so fervently believe that there's no other way to go than this, and any argument you bring in is just swatted away as being, well, it's being a climate denier. Actually, they just tell you that you're wrong. You're not only wrong, but you're also probably evil, and you do not see the way the world is going. So they use these personal or moralistic arguments against you. So, for example, if we tell them that CO2 does have a minor effect on the climate, but we're not sure whether it's going to be as impactful as is being propagated, then you're a climate denier and you do not want the future generations to live on this world. That is actually that is the arguments that come forth, and it just takes away, like, any form of reasonable discussion. You're like, no, that is not what I'm saying. It's actually a fallacy, of course, but it's proven difficult. So no, it's not going so well as I hoped it'd be. It's almost a bit of a disappointment, really.
So what gives you the courage to keep, and the strength to keep going in this direction and fighting against this?
Well, that's a very good question, because when 10 years ago I wouldn't envision myself in politics anyway.
Oh.
So that's very interesting, right? I think it's both something like a calling and something like a push. So I'm being called by the truth, because that's what's being calling me forward. I'm a very curious mind. I always question things, and I'm trying to find out, trying to be humble, because I do not know what the truth is. So I'm trying to find out what the truth is. So I'm calling forwards by the truth. And every time that in discussion, or when I see that things that are propagated as being true do not turn out to be true. So, for example, this is something that is being questioned right now in our country, is conservative values. So, for example, that free sex is without consequence. Well, what is the proof exactly that it is without consequence? I'm not saying that people shouldn't have loving intercourse with each other, but I've been questioning those. So I've been pushed by the things that go wrong, and I've been being called by the truth, and it's a journey that that is for few people, I think, because I have lost friends, and I've lost a girlfriend actually a few years back, and so you lose a lot of people on that journey, and for some reason that makes me think that I'm doing something. So one, either I'm just wrong, and I'm getting a lot of pushback because my vision and my way of seeing the world isn't right, or I'm actually doing something that is important, and there are things that need to be questioned and need to be, well, I wouldn't say exposed, but at least talked about, right? Because there are certain subjects that people just want to accept as being one way and not talk about it.
Yeah.
And
if you can't talk about something, then if it can't be discussed, whatever it is, then it doesn't have any breadth in it, in its purpose, because if it's so fragile, or so brittle that, and when things are brittle, there's no moisture left in them. There's no play left in the material.
No.
And so if you're in a conversation with someone and they try to bring something up that can't be discussed, then you got to wonder what exactly that is, because it's not. Ideas are expansive, right? Ideas are expansive. When you said you like to discuss ideas, and they can take you here and they can take you there. They're avenues of exploration. But these things, they're not.
No. Well, actually, even maybe ideas are ideas because they're alive, right?
Right.
Because people talk about them. And I think when you stop talking about ideas and they become this lifeless ideology, right? Because there's no conversation. Mm-hmm. There's just there's this ideology that things are the way they are. And
there's no spirit lifeless. In it.
No, and it might even possess people as being the truth. But ideas have to be talked about. Yeah. Yeah. So very good. So
farmers, how are the farmers doing in the Netherlands?
Oh, that's such a almost depressing subject, right? Because we've looked at the truckers in Canada as a form of inspiration too, because during the COVID pandemic,
yeah,
it's a chapter, but the truckers
tyranny. The COVID
tyranny, the pandemic. Well,
yeah,
but the truckers they rose up, right, and our farmers, they rose up too. There have been videos going around. Mm-hmm. The thing, the status quo right now is this: the EU still has plans for the EU, and it also accounts for the what do you call it? The nitrogen, mm-hmm. so that the farmers shouldn't expel as much as they should.
Right.
For the Netherlands, that's of course very low. It's almost unrealistically low, because they've done measurements. That means that within, I think, a month, within 100 square feet, there cannot be any excrement, including a bird's excrement, in that 100 feet.
Oh,
so that's
God.
not realistic, of course. Yeah, it's and the thing is, it's a paper reality, because what they do is they look from satellite images, and that looks at the whole area, and nitrogen doesn't stay within the Netherlands, right? Because it goes into the air, so an air moves around. So, well, anyway, the farmers are still very afraid, but there's been this pause. I saw the conversation you had with Eva. Since the last elections with the provinces, this party that wants to help the farmers has been installed in all the provinces, and the government, which has fallen now, we're busy with a agreement. So on basis of that agreement, we could say, okay, things are going to go a lot better, or they might not. But because the government has fallen, the whole agreement and the negotiations about the agreement have fallen flat. So we're actually waiting. So the short answer is, I cannot give you an accurate update. But what I can say is that a lot of farmers are still very afraid, because they believe that even though we switch from, like, for example, a very leftist climate belief politics coalition to a more realistic, maybe centre-right coalition, they believe that the EU is still going to enforce to expropriate a lot of farmers. Whether that's going to be true, we do not know. But there's still a fight to be fought. I think Eva's doing great work. And we need to continue to push and save our farmers, actually, because there are farmers that are either abandoning ship, they're just selling off. They don't want to fight anymore. They're done. Just give me the money from the government and I'll go to Spain. It's fine. And of course, if a lot of farmers that have been in the farming business their entire life, their parents, everyone in their generation and generations before that have been farming, they do not know. They do not have another profession. They want to stay farming. And Eva talked about this. There have been suicides amongst the farmers, which is just, we're taking away, well, not only on the food provision side, right? Because that's very important. But we're also taking away any future vision for these farmers, for these people, and have been nothing but providing for our country, but also the world, of course.
Now, what is your farming industry? Is it, how much of it is grain and how much of it is livestock?
I do not have the numbers in front of me.
No, that's
because,
okay.
But it's grain is low, so it's mostly vegetables. Yeah, grain is often other countries, so we import a lot of grain.
Yeah,
and it's mostly livestock and vegetables and corn and.
Do you think it's more? Is it more devoted to livestock than vegetables, or is it about like? Is it both? Is it really both?
If you look at it from a which uses more land, it's vegetable and corn. Yeah, right. Because obviously livestock needs less room. Of course, you want as much room as possible for livestock because that's better for the animals and it's against animal cruelty. But livestock needs less room than, for example, thousands of hectares of corn.
Right. And you know, I only eat meat, and so I eat less than one cow a year. Right.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be using hectares and hectares of land to plant plants and to fertilize them and harvest them and rototill the ground, you're going to kill thousands and thousands of rodents. Now, I don't know what you guys have for rodents. We have lots of rodents in North America. What kind of rodents do you guys have?
We have ferrets, we have mice, we have rats, we have squirrels, like all the Western typical. Okay, we do not have raccoons because that's more America, but we do have like most of the rodents that you will find in England and in Canada. We do have. And
do you know if they are if they're killed because of farming vegetables, or at least are their land is they have to leave their where they're living and go elsewhere.
Yeah, obviously, like even if we use other means of production, it still forces the animals to leave the grounds that have been worked upon. Also, if you till land, you will kill rodents. That's just what happens. That's why crows go to tilled land,
Right. I never thought of that till recently, but that is why they hang around there.
Which is kind of a morbid thought, but and but it also kills like bees and everything, and we also spray with toxic compounds, of course. I think that compounds that we use are less toxic than in America, because in America they sometimes use, I think it's called Groundnut, which has glyphosate in it. I think that is banned.
Do they still use
EU.
that? They might. I don't know.
I'm not sure. Maybe not anymore. But yeah.
I know that it's also talked about. It's really in Hawaii. There's signs all over in Hawaii not to use. That glyphosate is a terrible thing, and so maybe it might be all through the States that's the case.
Yeah. To come back to your argument, though, I think that taking away the moral question or the ethical question about animals, if you take that away, I think you can feed a lot more people, a bigger population, with meat, because it's so energy dense, right? You said yourself that you can live off a cow for an entire year, which is, if you think about it, and if you use all the meat and do not waste the animal, it's the most efficient way of feeding a population, because it uses less ground. The water they use, they excrete it. They also excrete poo.
They fertilize the land.
They fertilize the land. They eat the grasses. The grasses grow again. It's you could do it in a way that is very regenerative, very good for the land. It uses less land. So maybe it's a discussion we should have.
It is definitely a discussion we should have. Because I know that when they reintroduce wolves to land where the wolves have not been, when the wolves come back, because they go down to the spring to eat and then back up again, they end up having stronger plants that grow along the shores, and then there isn't as much land that soaks into the water, and little animals start to come back because now there's grass again, and so they can hide in the grass. And so all you have to do is bring large animals back to the land, and they support, not consciously, but just just being there, they support all the smaller animals that need to live there.
Yeah, exactly. I think we humans do not have the slightest idea what the whole ecology of animals and plants actually do for each other.
Well, we don't have to live there. We live in cities, and I've been reading a book. Yeah. I've been reading a terrible book about South Africa and the farmers in South Africa and the trouble that they're having there, and like more and more and more trouble.
Have you seen the video?
I haven't seen a video. I've been reading a book called Kill the Boar. And how the farmers are being slaughtered, really. Terrorized and slaughtered. And, and going to the city. So then they're going, and the people who survive, they move to the city because they can't live on the farms anymore, or they're afraid to live on the farms. So then they need to be given work in the city, but they're farmers. And so like you said, they've been generations of farmers. And now they're in the city. So then what does that do to the employment opportunities in the cities? Because now there's all these farmers who are no longer on the land that have come to the city. So we talk about unemployment and the troubles of unemployment, but we don't talk about why we have troubles with unemployment. Where are all these people coming from that are living in the cities now? That's part of the problem.
True, and I think a lot of people, they see a problem and they think of the solution because they think they know all the answers to all the problems of the world, but they do not ask why.
Yeah.
Why are the things they are, right? And talking about Kill the Boer, which is the book you're reading, might be interesting for your listeners who the author is. But there has been a video circulating on Twitter. I do not recommend watching it because it's not good for your soul, but there has been a video going around which at a congress or a rally, they have been actually calling this Southern Africans to kill the Boer. So there's...
Yes.
I think it was this...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That one. Yes.
It's appalling. Like, why aren't people talking about this, speaking out against this? Especially the Western countries. They're almost ignoring it. I'm not saying they are not ignoring it, but they're not paying as much attention to this as they should.
No, and we're not. The Canadians aren't saying if there are farmers that want to come to Canada, we are, opening our borders to them if they want to relocate. And I know that many people have relocated from South Africa, which is part of the problem too, is that they have to leave and then they can't, and then, they can't support it. But those people, and most of them are, I think it was above 50 years old that have been killed and driven off the land. So these are the people who have been farmers for generations and who were devoted to raising the plants and animals on the land and selling them to the people. And there's also and so then the land is going to go to commercial farmers.
Yeah.
And in a way, how the small farmers who raise cows, if they are taken off, then those cows are going to go to larger and larger feedlots, I imagine.
Yeah. And it's easier to control what happens with big corporate farmers than the small ones, right? The family-owned ones.
Is that happening in the Netherlands? Are things changing and becoming more corporate?
Yeah. What they want to do is the University of Wageningen is very keen on this, is they want to reduce the amount of farmers, and the farmers that stay, they agree to farm differently. So they use less land and they use genetically modified crops with CRISPR technology, vertical farming and such. And what happens is when they agree to stay, they also agree to abide by the regulations and the ways of farming that are imposed by the universities, which of course are technically sponsored by the state. And we're not sure whether they should do that. I advise against it because we have seen governments making the wrong calls en masse before. And there's nothing as good for population or a state or a nation as hard-working, hard-earning, knowledgeable family farmers. They know things that no 4-year bachelors can teach you, and we should not get rid of those people, because that is the hand that feeds you, right? Do not bite the hand that feeds you. So we're playing with fire. People do not tend to grasp that idea that these people are so important.
When you think back to the troubles that we have in Canada, where with the conversations that we have not had with the indigenous population, and they were the people of the land. They were the people who lived off the land, and then we put them on reservations. So in a way, they were individual farmers and fishermen. Many in the West in British Columbia on the west coast, they were fishermen because they were next to the Pacific Ocean. But then, of course, the Indians that were on the plains, they raised animals. And they farmed, and we collectivized them, right? And so now we're looking at farmers and wanting to collectivize them. And it didn't go well when we did that with the Indigenous people. There's nothing on the reserves for these people. And so then they end up going to the city.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing is happening in the retail industry, right? Because there are like these very big companies, Amazon, for example.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that Amazon shouldn't exist, but I'm saying it is causing some things that we might not want, because all the smaller boutiques and shops and family-owned industries, they just fall flat because they cannot compete anymore. Which is also something like it wants to be bigger and bigger, and we do not want the small family, the micro, right? We do not want, or some people, especially the globalists, they do not want a microcosm anymore, because if you have 15 million people to regulate and to push around, if you want, that's harder than 5 big companies,
right? And
that's something. I'm not saying it's a deliberate attack, but I'm saying that it's something we should talk about, and we should maybe worry about. That's a lot of things that were normal 50 years ago are just disappearing, and they're not just disappearing. They're not almost being replaced, but they're just like they're gone.
Yeah.
Especially the COVID pandemic has had a major effect on this. Like a lot of family-owned businesses, they just disappeared because they couldn't handle it anymore. There was no revenue, and then they had to borrow money from the government, and they cannot pay back the
loans.
They call it the loans. They cannot pay back, and now they have to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
It's something that's happening in the Netherlands, but it's also in Germany, France,
Canada,
perhaps even worldwide.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's so interesting. There's tyranny right from the government down to the individual.
Yeah,
and so in the Bible, Jordan was studying Exodus, and in the Exodus story, and I was listening. I was really lucky. I just got to listen and learn. But one thing that's talked about in the Bible is subsidiarity, and how you have that governance begins with 10 people. So you have 10 people together, and within those 10 people you make all your decisions. But if you can't make a decision, then you elect one person out of there to be your representative. And then you have groups of 10 and their representatives. And then when you have all the representatives, you gather them together and you have one representative out of that, and it goes up to 10,000. And so every decision that is made at the most local level. And the person at the top, who was Moses, and Moses was governing day and night and trying to adjudicate for everyone, and then found out that, he's just becoming the next Pharaoh. He was becoming the next tyrannical leader. Everyone needs to be at the local level doing their negotiation and their governance, and if they can't figure it out, then you just go one step up. But you only go to the very top, like the EU would be, for the things that can't be figured out. But the way we're doing it now is everything is in the EU, and they're trying to enforce governance, and that just won't end well. It won't. I went to the EU. I had no idea the monstrosity in Brussels. The size of it. I was shocked by. I just saw.
Huge.
it's so huge that I think, this is so instantiated now. I can't see how to disassemble it. I mean, it's a large monster. It's definitely a large monster.
That's a very accurate description, because I think you cannot dismantle it because they made it so, right? They've made it impossible to dismantle this Tower of Babylon. If we're talking about biblical narratives, I think the EU is a prime example of something that started out as a good initiative, but is going into the metaphor of the Tower of Babel, and people are not seeing this either. And what you said about governing from bottom up, I think that's the best way. There's this author, he's called Jocko Willink.
Yeah.
He was a Navy SEAL, and he actually wrote about this. He said, if you want to govern especially a Navy SEALs team, which has to operate in the highest difficult circumstances, you have to give out decentralized command, which I think is the same thing as you described, right? You have to give the power and the autonomy to the lowest group possible, so they can do what they can do, and they can do it well. And if they do not know anymore, then they can go up higher. But if that's not needed, if that's not necessary, then keep it local. And maybe that is, I think that is the best way to govern a family unit, a society. Maybe it just scales up that idea of bottom-up governance. But that's not the way the EU works. It's not the way the state works, because I was at a day of the board, which is actually a conference of governance, and they opened the conference with saying, "To lead is to add injury," which is just a crazy statement to open a conference with, right? And everyone just laughed at this, because all the board members that were there just accepted this as being the natural way of doing things. And I was like, how have we come this far that we do not question when these things are being said? But anyway.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
Yeah, wow. Oh well. So the EU, it's a big monstrosity, and I do not think it will stop growing. I think it actually legitimizes its position, especially with the wars going on. Because that's one of the reasons why the EU exists, right? It's because of the conflicts in the East with Russia, and now the conflicts that are rising in Africa. The EU is just making itself more and more important, and it's going to be interesting how it's going to turn out, and if we can get away from this whole thing just in time.
Yes. Well, people are very ingenious, and I think that when Jordan and I traveled around in 2018, the people that came to Jordan's talks were suffering. Many of them were suffering, and many of them were talking about their suffering. And we traveled again for the last 18 months. So now it's 4 years later, and most of the people who came well dressed, usually with a girlfriend, or maybe with their father, or maybe even with their families. And they talked about what they've done. They've got their education, they're working, they're married, and maybe starting a family. And so the narrative this time around was different than the narrative the first time that we went on tour. So it I mean, just talking to you and seeing that there are voices in the government that are still reasonable and trying to search for the truth, that should give everyone hope, I think. I'm hopeful.
Well, it's interesting because thank you for the compliment. But I think a lot of people actually see your family as being one of the initiators of that hope, and I think it's spreading because a lot of people that I talk to that come in contact with work you and your husband and your daughter do, they're instilled with this hope that there is still hope, and then they start to they start to clean their room, I suppose.
Yeah.
It gets a ball rolling, and you have no idea what that will do in the future, and so.
Everybody thought it was funny that he talked about getting your room clean, but I think what he was going after was to come back to the local. Come back to the local and see what's right in front of you. And
so the immediate presence.
Yeah,
right?
and take the next right step. And that's all you have to do. And Carl Jung was the one who said to take the next right step. And Jordan has done a lot of reading and thinking about the philosophy of Carl Jung, that's for sure. But I know that is, if we're talking about the spiritual life again, it exists in the present, right? It doesn't exist in the past, and it doesn't exist in the future. It's only a present phenomena. And so that's why, like, when you're in a conversation with someone, you have to listen, because you have to be present with what's being said so that you can be informed. And there's so much now when people are talking, there's so much animosity. People are only thinking about what they themselves can bring to it, and instead of understanding that conversation is about receiving. It's about what what you're inspired to say, but it's about receiving. And
I talked to a friend, I think a month ago, and she saw a podcast of yours, and she said that what was very interesting and almost humbling to her was that when you do a podcast, you're listening so well that it almost becomes like a harmony or something. It's just it's different from most people because you can see the way you look at a person and the way your non-verbal behavior is like that. You are actually listening and you're receiving, and I think that's very powerful. And maybe you're a very good inspiration for a lot of people to start listening more.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I think that when I didn't know what I was doing when I started a podcast. I wanted to do it, but I thought I have no idea what I'm doing. And Jordan said, just ask questions. Just listen and ask questions. That's a podcast. And I worked as a massage therapist for a long time. So I spent a lot of time listening. Listening to my clients' bodies, but also listening to what they would say during a session. And the days that I would talk too much, I wouldn't do a very good massage usually. I had to listen. And so I think maybe that was good training.
Is it okay if I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that listening at your level is a skill or a talent?
A skill. I think it's a skill. Oh, for
sure. How could people improve that skill?
Well, I started meditating when I was 13 years old. I left the church and started doing yoga. I shouldn't have left the church, but I didn't know any better. I was only 13. And so I was learning how to meditate. So I was learning to listen. because really meditation is listening. And so I didn't meditate for that long, maybe 5 minutes or something. I mean, when I was 13, I was, meditating on a candle and little things that they will teach you to do to start you to be able to just center your mind, on one thing, and then to notice the thoughts that come to your head, but not necessarily act on them. So I started doing that, and then when I was in my mid-20s, I learned how to do a very good exercise in Kundalini yoga, which is it's a bringing up of your energy for the day. So it's a serpent that is supposed to be inside you that you're awakening. You're awakening the serpent. And it was funny because we were moving from Montreal to Boston, and I had just had my first baby, and I was pregnant with my second baby. And I never used to worry about moving from here to there, but now I have little ones. And so I was much more worried about how this was going to go. And I had a dream. I had a dream that I had a serpent that was up here and was guiding me.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And so I had done this Kundalini yoga. Now, I probably started when I was 26, and now I was 33. And so I had done this every day, every morning for 11 minutes, this exercise, which I have recorded, and I'm going to put online because I think it's a very good exercise. It's a very good exercise. And it helps people to gather their energy for the day and focus. To gather their energy, focus, and realize that you are going to be able to, whatever comes at you that day, you will be able to attend to. And so it gives you courage and focus, I would say. And so I did that
so interesting.
For a long time, till I was probably 50. And then I came back, to the Judeo-Christian tradition, and there's a lot to read and a lot to learn. And I myself haven't joined a church yet. I plan to join the Catholic Church now. My great-grandmother was Catholic. She was from Poland. And when my grandmother came to North America, she changed our religion to Protestant. But I think so Catholic seems to me like the way that I will go back to. I was interested in Orthodoxy as well because the dogma in the Orthodoxy is even older, before the churches separated, right? So I wondered if I should go back that far. As far as I can tell now, no. But it's hard to tell, right? You kind of have to go do the next right thing and not worry about too far in advance. And so I just pray. I pray every day. And I took that meditation that I was doing every day, and now I've turned it to prayer, and I pray every day. But it was pretty natural for me to change from the yoga tradition of meditation to the prayer tradition in Christianity, because I'd already devoted myself to taking that time. So I'm going to do a podcast with Bishop Robert Barron at the end of the month.
Yeah, I know him.
And he wants to talk
that's so interesting.
about prayer with me, because I pray, so he wants to talk about prayer with me. But he wrote a little book called it's not the Heavenly, it's the Holy Hour. That's it, the Holy Hour. And he believes we should take an hour a day to listen to God's Word.
Okay, that's so interesting. Yeah, I'm I'm hoping to see the podcast soon, because I'm also trying to pray almost every day. It's a challenge. I think you've been more naturally inclined to spirituality.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think so.
It's something I have to teach myself. So, and I'm also on the cusp of orthodoxy or Catholicism, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a search. It's a journey.
It is.
Perhaps those who will knock, right?
Yes, I think so. And I really feel, well, that's why I have this podcast, really, too. I didn't expect to be talking to people on in studios or online. I didn't expect this at all. And I never thought of myself as someone who could do this and who would enjoy it. And I do enjoy it. So, but so you don't know, right? You're a politician. You don't know why.
Don't know, no.
I have a podcast. I don't know why. But that's not what's important. The importance is that it seems meaningful.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why I became a politician, because I saw a lot of things going wrong, and I wanted to clean my room, as it were. And it wasn't that I consciously decided. Of course, you consciously decide to do something eventually, but the idea emerged out of well, I wouldn't say nothing, but it presented itself before me. I was, okay, you want to do something with your life, you want to clean your room, you want to follow the truth, then this is, well, to talk about Jordan's book, this is a dragon you can conquer, right? And then I just follow that, and it leads me to here. And so it's so interesting that the future works that way.
Yes, that's for sure.
It's very interesting.
I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have known that. And but that's the fun of living this way, is you don't know what's going to happen. What could be better than that? What could be more exciting than that? Is that you don't know what's going to happen. All you know is the next right thing that you're going to do, the next dragon you're going to slay. That's all you know, and you don't know where that's going to lead. It's
kind of like the hero's journey, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's just as good for men as it is. It's just as good for women as it is for men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, looking back, I wouldn't want it any other way too. But that's the interesting thing, right? Because you go through ups and downs, and you lose people, and you have fights, and you have to stand your ground sometimes when you do not want, because it's very. I don't like conflict, so sometimes it results in conflict. But looking back, I do not regret it, and I think that the way and the progression I've made and where I ended up might be the place where I have to be for some reason. You know, it's almost like a spiritual endeavor, and not as much as a rational, planned thing. Some things they present, and you take the opportunity, or you don't.
I think that's a really good way to investigate the transcendent. Is to, you don't have to think of it as anything more than trying to tell the truth and to take your cues from whatever seems to be the next right thing, because you'll see miracles happen as you go along. I do. I see.
Oh yes.
I see what I call miracles. Other people might say, well, that's that's just a coincidence, or you were going that way anyway. But I see things that are that I would have before. I would have tried to fix, but instead now I wait, and I see it work out better than I could have planned. Yeah.
True. I think sometimes the miracles that people experience, they might be mystical. But sometimes there's also the small miracles, like people that always have been afraid and then suddenly decide to follow the truth. And even if it costs, or might even cost everything, like their job, their social reputation, and they just go for it. And that's maybe even a miracle in itself, because rationally speaking, why would you even do this? Especially because I have been following your family for quite a while. I've read all the books, and also your husband. He spoke out against the regulation that was, or at least Bill 16, that was trying to impose language. And like a rational person would have said, okay, if you're going to fight this dragon, you'll probably put yourself into a lot of danger, right? Like social danger, lawful danger. But he didn't abide by it, and he did fight the dragon, which is, and there is not a lot of courage in our world. Like people are often very afraid, and against all odds to choose the difficult path is courage, and courage is a form of a small miracle, I suppose. A small miracle.
Well, I don't have the courage to go up on stage and talk with Jordan. I ask for courage before I go up on stage, and that gives me courage, because I trust that I will be given the courage to speak the truth as much as I know what is truthful. I just ask for that before I go on stage, because people, when I get off the stage, they say, oh, I could never do that. And I say, oh yeah, you could. Actually, if I can do it, you could do it, because I'm not an intellectual. I'm not a teacher. I didn't spend my life lecturing. So for me to get up on stage and tell a story is new. It's new and unknown, and but I've realized that's okay. And sitting here with you also, I had one fellow that I invited for a podcast, and I read one of his books, and I thought, I can talk to this guy. And then I read his next book, and I thought, I don't understand that a bit. And so then I told him I couldn't talk to him. I got scared. And he said, well, you just want to have a phone call. And I said, okay. And we had the best phone call. And I thought, this could have been a podcast. I mean,
should have recorded this. Yeah.
That's right. I thought, well, I'm not doing that again. I'm not chickening out again. I'm not going to do that. So... Right.
Well, that's an improvement, and I think it's so interesting because to reflect on what you've just said is that I have a background in education, so I used to be a teacher, and when I was younger, I feared speaking in front of groups. I never wanted to speak in front of groups, and it made me nervous. I didn't want to go to school when I had to do it, and now it's actually what I do. I speak in front of people.
Right. That's a dragon. So, there's a dragon for you.
the future can be full of potential.
Yes.
Every turn we make, it's so interesting.
Yeah. No, it's a blast, really. It can be a blast.
Yeah, it is a blast.
Yes, it's a blast. That's right. And you could have that kind of life if you can let it happen. And give up the control that you want to have over things you can't control. That's where people find the frustration, is they're trying to control things that are so out of their hands that their lives aren't all that much fun. But it can be quite a bit of fun. Not. And it can be fun to watch what other people are like and where they go.
That is true too.
Right? Instead of trying to control it. Because, if they're going to go careening down a hill and run into something, there's nothing we can do about it except for be there when they land. Is about all we can do.
Yeah, well, that's true. And that even for governance, that might be an interesting take, right? Because you can try and control every little small thing, but it might be more courageous to just let it go.
Yeah.
And see where the ship may land.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so we're in a precarious time because the ships are careening for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But all we can do, each of us, if each of us chooses our own course, then we can be there. We can be there to notice what the next right thing is and get things back on the right path again. I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. It's so interesting that most politicians I talk to, especially those who believe in the green dream and the gender ideology, for example, which is also very it's indoctrinated and perpetuated in every social institution.
What's going on there? I mean, here, of course, the surgeons are making loads of money by butchering children. What are they doing? Are they doing that kind of thing in Europe? Or has it not got there?
Oh, yeah, they are.
They are, eh? Oh.
They are. And it's the interesting thing is that a lot of countries in Europe, they sometimes are like these pilot countries. So sometimes they are even further progressive in certain ways than Canada or the United States of America. But sometimes we lag behind like an inch. So there have been surgeries in the Netherlands of young people, minors, but there's this gap. So I think that you cannot do a mastectomy if you're below the age of 15. So there is a limit, but 15 is still too young.
Way too young.
They're still in their adolescence. Yeah, way too young. So there have been a lot of things happening. The most troublesome part is the manner of normalizing and confusing the children. I think that's the biggest problem at this moment. If you look at the data, in 2018, there were 640 people that wanted to transition, like nationwide. In 2019, there were 7,600. That's an increase of about 1,000%. The interesting part is, why is that? Well, I think your husband talks about this with the interview with Chloe Cole, is that when you there are things that are known like psychological epidemics, right? If you create a lot of interest and it becomes a social contagion, people actually can identify with certain illnesses. And it's just they are confusing, sorry to say, but the hell out of young children. There are children from the ages to 4 to 12 in classrooms during this week. It's 1 week per year. In Dutch, it's called lentekriebels. In English, it would say spring fever. So when all the animals become quite flirtatious, right? Yeah. So every year there's this week, and schools are obligated to spend that week talking about sexual education. Now they have these lesson materials. For example, the genderbread man, which is a pun from the gingerbread man. Yeah, and
I've seen that.
So what the children have to do is they have to look at the gingerbread man, and they have to envision that's you, and they have to value yourself on a scale from female to male. How much do you feel like a woman? How much do you feel like a man? They have to ask their parents, what do you think I am? Have you seen signs of me being the opposite, maybe? And we're talking about a cluster of children that usually aren't very much occupied with this subject matter, right? I mean, most children between the ages 4 of 12 are not very occupied with this stuff, and there's a reason for that, of course. But so that's every year. There has been a very large controversy about that because 2 political parties asked questions, because of course this is quite controversial. Why would you ask young people like these questions? The Minister of Education first promised to look into it and to share the lesson material. And I think a few months later, he denied the insights into the lesson material. So that's very remarkable.
And what do you take from that he denied it? How do you explain that?
Well, politically, probably that he found something that would discredit the way they're using their policies right now, and would create a ruckus, maybe something like electoral damage for the parties that impose this or are trying to defend it. Perhaps there's something unclear and they want to find it out and just extend the period of investigation. Could also be. Mm-hmm. But they are not going to disclose the information right now. So all the information that we do get is via parents, right? So the children, they make photos with their smartphone and they send it to the parents, and parents, they send the photos to us. And it's so it's ingrained in every social institution right now. And the thing is, a lot of parents, they don't even know that their children are being taught this.
No.
And that's very well, it could be dangerous, of course, but it's also, how did we come to the point that when you deliver your child to the school, that you do not know what's being taught? It's so strange, because in a democracy, you are the one that pays for the education.
Yeah, right.
So you should know as a parent, well, not even from a moral standpoint, because of course you should know as a parent what's being taught to your child, but from a democratic viewpoint, you should know, because you are the one who organizes and pays, technically speaking, for the education. So of course you should know what's being taught there. It's your education. It's public education. It's not owned by the state. Well, legally it is, but the state is owned by the people, right? Because we're a democracy. But anyway, it's so interesting.
We've left the schools, though. We've left the schools. Now women go out and work. They've left their homes.
Oh, yeah.
They've left their communities, and they've left their children to the education system. I mean, we have done that. And so what goes on in the school, where we've become separated from what goes on in the school. We're not on the school boards. We're not involved like we were, except for that we're paying for it.
Exactly, yeah. So when the communities were much smaller, and probably people you knew from the village were actually teaching at the school, and you went to the school board and everything, it used to be much easier to know what's going on, and to have also a personal relationship with the people who are teaching your kids. And we've completely steered from that path.
Yeah. Sometimes
even in the Netherlands, people go to school that is not even in their village, right, or the city. They go to a whole different one. Mm-hmm. And it creates this distance that it's hard to know when things are going wrong and to steer them back into the right path.
Yeah. And wondering where the right path is. Now there's a question. So I'm going to be doing an interview with a friend of mine whose daughter came home when she was 11. I think she was 10 or 11. She came, one day they were going for a walk, and she said to her mum, sometimes people think that I'm a boy. And her mum said, yeah, well, you have short hair and that can happen. And then she goes, I don't mind, And then that put a red flag up in her mother's mind, but she didn't say anything. She let that go. And then a couple months later, she came home and she said that she wanted to be a boy. Talked to as a boy, not as a girl. And so then her mother thought, okay, this has gone too far. And she did a couple of things. She showed her Abigail Schreier's video on gender, which really describes in detail the physical manipulations that go through in changing someone's gender. So it's a good thing for someone to know if they're thinking of going down that road. And she just started spending more time with her daughter, as much as her daughter would allow, but not enforcing it. So she wasn't trying to change her, or even she wasn't trying to impose what she thought, because she didn't want. She would react. She's a teenager. She's not going to. So she just was gentle with her. Prayed. She prayed a lot for her daughter to find her way, and her mother and I are in a spiritual program, so we talk daily and try to keep our minds clear on what is truthful. And over time, because she was paying attention, her daughter one day was having a shower, and she came out of the shower and looked in the mirror and began to cry. She thought maybe she was wrong, that maybe she was a girl. But it made her cry because she had been so indoctrinated by the school into identifying as a boy. One morning, she had realizing that maybe she was wrong. It was upsetting for her, and she came to her mom and admitted that she could see her error in her judgment. And I think, because I'm going to interview her, because I think people need to listen to how to respond when your child has been indoctrinated, how to respond and how to reach them, because this is and I think back to the Aztecs, and I think we have been sacrificing our children to ideology forever.
Yeah.
This is not the first time. This is just
No.
awful. It's so painful. It's so destructive this time that I think people are going to have to take this seriously. And this might be the call back to the transcendent that people need, because man, oh man, our children are suffering, and there's just no way that is going to get by us. I can't see how that can get by us. As parents, we've got to let go of our egos, right? Let go of our egos and humble ourselves and ask for help from God above to save our kids. Really, I mean, I just can't see any other way to deal with this.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that it has to do with humility, but it also has to do with courage.
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents, they're so afraid of the social stigma when you speak up out against this. I mean, I've had a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, call me after the speech I did, and she came to me and she said it's really, really bad at the mental institutions right now, because parents they come see the clinical psychologist with, for example, a young girl who suffers from automutilation and is autistic, doesn't feel like she belongs in our body, is bullied, shamed, and the parents, they do not know what to do, because that's where the medical profession is for, right? They have studied and they should know what to do. But the same thing that happened in America with the gender affirming care is also taking place in the Netherlands. So when they go to a pediatrician or they go to a clinical psychologist, when they see the child in front of them, they almost assume that it probably has to be that they're trans. Like they have this checklist, but with their confirmation bias, they just check all the checks. And she said to me that because she switched one of the places she worked at, that at her first day at the new job, she walked with another psychologist, and they had a young girl, I think she was 12, in the room. And they had this, because the talks are about 30 minutes, right? 30 to 45 minutes is very short. And when they were done, the psychologist said, well, she's trans and she has to be on hormone blockers right away. We cannot wait a year. They were actually disappointed and angry about the fact that if you are diagnosed with gender dysmorphia and you want to transition, that there's a protocol in place that you have to wait with any hormone treatment for a year. I mean, the psychologists are so grasped by this idea of the gender ideology, and parents, they just freak out because they do not know where to go to, because if they go speak out against this publicly, they get shamed for it, right? Because if you speak out, you're either a transphobe or you're a anti-trans activist. It's like there is no conversation, and the parents, they do not know what to do with their kid, because the kid is often on social media. So, for example, TikTok has been known to have a large LGBTQ following, and they give tips on how to transition, where to find medication to initiate the hormone blockage or supplementation, whether you get a doctor's prescription or not. They can actually find it via other websites, and it's just it's so appalling that this has been going on for at least a few years, and parents are, of course, they're very afraid that this might even be the wrong choice, and there are also parents that think that it is the right choice. Those are parents that I'm afraid for the future for their children.
Yeah, because they're also captured by this ideology.
Yeah. So, for example, this is a small example. In a city near me, it's a very liberal city. They have a school that is a gender neutral school. Okay. And it's a primary education. So that means from 4 till 12. So because the school exists, it means that a lot of parents had to sign up for that and had to send their children to that school, which proves something. At least the parents believed in the gender neutrality, which of course it doesn't exist. I mean, there is no neutrality and there's no non-binary. You are either one of the two, and you can feel something else. You can feel that you might be in the wrong body, but it doesn't mean that you can change your sex or you belong in another body.
You know what I think is going on? So, maybe, I don't know.
Who knows?
So when people feel this, they feel something's missing, is what they feel, right? So they think that, I'm a girl, I need to be a boy because I feel something is missing. It must be that I'm in the wrong body. But that thing they're missing, that's not, that's God that they're missing. So they've misunderstood that this feeling of emptiness they feel, they think is, they're going to find the answer through science, through surgery, and medicine too. Medicine. When I came home from being told I had 10 months to live, and I'm sure they did whatever they could to find a good diagnosis, right? The prognosis they gave me, they had done their due diligence. I'm sure they had done their due diligence. But they told me that, and I accepted it. I accepted it like they knew what they were talking about. And in some ways they did, but, not 100%. So, but when I went home to tell my son, and I looked at him and he looked at me, and I saw that his love for me was bigger than the love I had for myself. So it was a profound experience for me. And then I realized that doctors don't have the final say, that God has the final say. We've forgotten that. We've forgotten that. We think that medicine, that doctors can make us feel full again, but they can't. They can fix broken bones, and they can treat cancers. They can do all kinds of miraculous things. But when somebody just has a feeling like they're missing something, doctors can't solve that problem. That they're going to the wrong place. They need to go to where the only place that can fill you up is your own relationship with the transcendent. That's the only thing that can fill you up. And until you've experienced that, you don't know it's missing. But I think that's what's missing. And so again, just like the climate people who are on a religious crusade, these trans activists and surgeons and psychologists, and they're also on another religious crusade. So we're seeing this, and I think something that Jordan may have said publicly is that if you're not with the transcendent, when you leave that, then it comes up in a multiplicity, and so you can see this searching come up in different places. So we're seeing it come up in climate and in gender dysphoria now, and who knows what will be next. There'll be another one too, until we go back, until we get off of our high horses and go back and go back and get down on our knees. We're going to be experiencing these weird religious fanatic kind of troubles,
symptoms, maybe. Yeah.
Very strange. It's very strange.
Very, very strange, but
understandable. Maybe
very understandable, and I think you might be on the right path. And I do not. I'm not rejecting the idea too, because it's so interesting that I think 2 weeks ago I read a quote. I think it was from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who of course endured the communism regime, and he looked at it and he said, "I've looked at how can we make sure that this never happens again. Why was it even possible, right?" And he looked inside himself, because he thought, well, maybe I did something wrong. And there were people in his immediate environment that said, this all happened because we stopped believing in God.
There you go.
And he spent his life searching for another conclusion. But he could never find evidence that the opposite was true. So he never rejected the idea. And maybe you are right. And maybe we're just trying to fill a void. And some people that ignore that void, the void gets filled in anyway. But then by something that is not right. Yeah, that is not true.
It's like a chocolate cake is just not going to fill that void.
No.
I wish it would. That would be fun, but nope. Because then you'll just be empty again in the morning.
It will be, and maybe that is what humans have been doing the last few decades, maybe even century. Is they're continually trying to fill that void with something, and then they notice that it's empty, or it hasn't any juice left anymore, and then they hop on a new adventure, and they find out that that is not the salvation they're searching for, and the wonder, of course, the question is, when is it enough, and how far can you go? And perhaps we are misled, and maybe we should be humble and subject ourselves to the highest high.
Yeah, maybe looks that way to me, because I was completely done. You know, when I was diagnosed, I was given my last. That was going to be the last year of my life, you know. And from the moment I realized that, although I would take the care that I was given, gratefully take the medical care that I was given, it was not up to the doctors whether I lived or died. You
said that you took the care, but you decided, or you believed, that it wasn't up to the doctors to decide. At what point did you get to that realization?
So I had a first surgery already, because they thought what I was suffering from was just it was cancer, but it was a cancer that I didn't even really need surgery for, because it wasn't going to kill me, you know. So they took out half my kidney, and then it was 6 weeks later, I started having pain in my back, which is the one symptom that you get of this other kind of cancer that mostly they diagnose after you're dead, because it is so aggressive. And they did a biopsy when they did the first surgery, and what came back from that biopsy was that I actually had something called a Bellini tumor on my kidney, and a Bellini tumor is deadly. It's a deadly tumor. And so they told me, we were wrong, sorry, you're going to die. We need to get you back in the hospital right away, and there are no good treatments for this because everybody dies. So we don't do chemotherapy or radiation or biological interventions. All we know to do for this is surgery, and we hope that it works for you, but because mostly people die. And so I went home, you know, to tell my son. And I believed them. I believed, and I've always thought I was kind of skeptical of medicine, but in our society, we believe doctors know what they're talking about. Look what happened in the COVID tyranny. We believed the doctors, you know, so...
Blindly.
Yeah, right, blindly. So I believed them blindly until I got home and had a conversation with my son and told him. And when I saw the pain on his face, when I told him that I was only going to live for 10 months more, that, to see that pain on his face was because I loved him. It allowed me to reflect on my love for myself, I think. And I think that is what opened my awareness to there being something more than me, right? There was something more than me. Yeah, it was a very odd time. And you know, later on, Jordan was very upset that I was ill. You know, I mean, he was having a hard time, and I said, you know, Jord, I'll be all better by our anniversary. So this was in June, and our anniversary was the 19th of August. And I had surgery, and the surgery went well, but I had a complication, and they couldn't figure out what to do about the complication. And so I was, all my bodily fluids were draining out of me, and I wasn't getting any nutrition. And so I was going to die from that instead. So then for months they were trying to find what was wrong with me. And I went down to the States to an interventional radiologist who could look on an MRI. They put dye in my lymph system, and then they'd look on the MRI and hopefully see a plume where there was a leak, but they couldn't find it. And so I was praying every day, and on the fourth day of prayer, I noticed that I wasn't having, there wasn't a lot of, because I had a bag on the side of me, so there wasn't a lot of fluid in the bag. And so I ate some fat, because if you eat fat, your lymph system works. That's what it does. It takes the fat and it metabolizes the fat with the help of the gallbladder. That's how it works. And so then you get milky fluid in your lymph. And so if it was leaking, I would have milky fluid in this bag. And I didn't have any milky fluid in the bag. And so then the intern and the nurse came to me and they said, "You're going to have to eat some fat." And I said, "I ate some fat last night." They said, "Well, let's see the bag." So I showed it to them and they said, "Oh, well, it's still clear. You must be healed." And so half an hour later, they pulled out all the plugs that they had in me and I went home, and that day was our anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. So
talking about miracles.
Yeah, so I can't say there's no God anymore. I just can't do it. No, I can't do it. And so whenever I have conversations now, it always comes around to the transcendent, because for me that's all there is now. I'm screwed.
Yeah. You've lived the transcendence and you've come back.
Yeah.
Not able to believe anything else.
Yeah,
anymore,
that's right. Yeah.
Does it give you a? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Does it give you a form of courage too, that you know that's the case?
Yes, it does.
Like you're not in doubt anymore.
No, there's no doubt anymore. Yeah. What a gift, huh?
Yeah, it is a gift.
It was a gift. That cancer that I went through, that horrible months and months of suffering, was a gift. And I know that I was told many times before, I was given indications that there was a transcendent, you know? I was... There were little indications, like I was skiing when I was 17, and I went down the hill really fast because I was going to have to trudge along to get to the lift again, and I didn't want to trudge along, so I was going as fast as I could, and I came over this hill and there was a big rock, about 5 feet wide and 5 feet tall, big rock. And I was skiing straight for it, and I saw my life flash before my eyes. And I opened my eyes, and I was by the rock. I don't know how I got by the rock, and I didn't go back to look. So I must have, just skimmed by it or something. I don't know. But I saw my life flash before my eyes. But that didn't get me I didn't believe in God because of that. That wasn't enough, right? I was so stubborn. So stubborn. That he had to give me a life-threatening cancer. Like, pay attention.
I heard this metaphor before, that the Holy Spirit, it knocks on the door and it keeps knocking, and every time you do not listen, it knocks harder.
Yeah, I think
until
that's
it
true.
has to break and kick in the door for you to listen. Maybe that's true. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's why Jordan and I had such a terrible time that year. I think we were both had lessons to learn that year, and so.
Well,
I'm sure we'll have more lessons
glad.
to learn, but I am trying to pay attention.
I think a lot of people have been doing that because of the lessons you've learned, and so hopefully collectively we can start experiencing the transcendence, and who knows what the future brings then, eh?
That's right. Well, I think what did they say? It only takes one man to bring down a tyranny.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's no telling what you can do if you subject yourself to a higher purpose.
Yeah.
You follow the truth, and you're humble, and as you said, you listen, and you're courageous. I think the future is impossible to determine that way. So it's an amazing story, your story. I mean, if you talk about that, like the whole story you've been through, your whole life, the moments you've talked about, the missing the big rock, and the thing, the cancer you've endured and you stepped from, and it's quite powerful.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Yeah, it's quite powerful.
In a way.
It's powerful enough that I feel an obligation to, well, I prayed when I was sick, and I recognized that I wasn't, what does it say in the Bible, that you shouldn't leave your light under a bushel, right? That that a light has to shine. And so I felt like I wasn't sharing what I knew, or even not what I know, but just sharing my experience with other people, and asking them what their experience. I wasn't negotiating and sharing like I needed to. And I prayed and I said, I promise if I live that I will speak publicly. I won't hide who I am or what I am curious about.
Yeah, you're spreading your light.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that.
And your transcendence.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that because I'm a grandmother now. I'm a grandmother. I have to make sure that my kids are taken care of. There's nothing more important than that. And so, and our society's doing an abysmal job of standing up for our kids. So we all got to wake up.
Yeah, we certainly do, because there are a lot of things going wrong right now. And
so when you get up in the morning, just ask in the morning, what do you have for me today?
I will.
Yeah, just get up in the morning and say, what do you have for me today? Let's go. And then just pay attention that day and see what it is that you're supposed to do. And man, all kinds of things will happen.
Well, you might end up in a podcast with you.
Yeah, that's right.
Might happen.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that that life, in certain ways, is so unpredictable. Because even if you make a 5-year plan, which some people do, and there's nothing wrong with planning something, of course. Sometimes it's very good to have a certain sense of direction, but life can take you way in that direction, into another direction, without even acknowledging that happened.
Yeah. Well, I know that I did Jordan's future authoring program when it was just pencil and paper, before he'd put it online. He said, do this thing.
Might be even better.
He said, do this thing for me and see what there is to it. And I didn't have a lot of direction from my childhood. I was told to go to university and to take care of myself, really, and to be smart. That was about it. Like, that was the guidance, which was not bad. It was my dad, and he gave me good enough guidance. But I never really knew what to pursue or anything. And then I did Jordan's future authoring program, and it tells you to have a vision, to dream about who you might be in 5 years if you're taking good care of yourself. I thought, okay. And then to write down all these goals, just life goals. I wanted to make sure I brushed my teeth more often. I wanted to know if I should have any more children. I wanted to fix my relationship with my father. Like, I had a number of different goals. I wanted to pursue art because I really love art. And all of those things I've done. My relationship with my father is very good now. It's very good. My teeth aren't in bad shape. And this fall I'm going to Florence for 2 weeks to study Renaissance portrait painting. So this future authoring program that he developed, I think it's one of the best things he ever did. I think it's really good.
I've actually, the future authoring program, I know he did some research work in Rotterdam.
Yes, he did.
Which is a city, in Holland. And I actually saw the conclusions from that research. And I've actually done one of those exercises because it looks at your life from different perspectives, right? What do you want? What do you do not want? And I've taken a few of those questions and I've given them to my students when I was still teaching. And I have to say that some pupils didn't really find it very interesting, but I think that's also also has to do with if you have to look at your life in a future program, but also what you do not want, you have to be very critical and you have to be humble enough to look at it from a critical perspective, of course. But a lot of students that were very much helped by the exercises, and I think it's I did make them do it by paper though, with pen and paper, because the questions I couldn't afford it because it was my initiative, so I couldn't pay for the whole classroom. But I did make them write it down on a piece of paper with a pen, and it did help a few pupils. They were really enjoying the first hour was a bit hard. But then when they got into it, they really enjoyed it, and they had this thing to look forward to.
How long did they work on it for?
2 classes, so I think in total 2 or 3 classes, so maybe 1.5 to 3 hours.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Wasn't the full program, but it was a few questions of those, and the pupils were helped by it, and I think a lot of educational institutions could be helped by offering their students this program.
Did you notice if the boys were helped more than the girls, or the girls were helped more than, or the kids who weren't doing as well were helped more than the kids who were already doing well? Did you notice anything there?
I noticed a slight difference with the boys. The boys had a harder time to get into the subject matter, right, to focus and to concentrate on the task at hand. I think the females had a easier job on focusing, I think, because maybe they think about the future more than men, perhaps, who knows. But when the boys got to really push down on their tasks, they were grasped by it, and they were really thinking and doing. I had one or 2 pupils really say that it changed the way they looked at their future, because they hadn't thought about it anyway, and when they did it, they were like, I've never thought of my life as something I could pursue. I always lived it as if it happened, and in ways it does happen, but in ways it of course is also directional. You can set a path and you can follow it, and so it already has helped a few pupils, and they really enjoyed the thought process too, right? So it's not only the resulting document that you've written, but it's also just the process of just thinking about it, and so that's it's a very fruitful program.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think it is. I really do. I think it is. And you said that you did it as well?
I have, but I haven't completed it fully. And it also, you have to update it, I think.
I think you just have to finish it. I think the first time I did it, it was the most... I did it a couple of times, and I think the first time I did it was the most helpful. You know, you do it. It's a good thing to do in transition. If you're, say, changing jobs or finishing a big project and you're starting another one, it's a good time to do it because you have to align yourself with the vision again. But I did think, for myself anyway, the first time I did it was the most profound.
Definitely. Coming back to something, you talked about how we took women away from the community in many ways. And that's because we've sold them a certain kind of narrative of you can determine your own values, you can do whatever a man can do, which in some ways is possible, in some ways maybe not. But we've taken away the female from the household in many ways, also the community as a whole. That's a narrative that's being proposed on women for a long time. What do you, as a grandmother, think that what's a better narrative for women?
Well, I read Mary Harrington, who's an intellectual in Britain. Mary Harrington wrote a book. I can't remember the name of it, but I have my phone right there. I could look it up. But she wrote a book I read, and in it she described feminism of freedom is what we've been taught and learning.
Sold, maybe.
And sold. And that there's a feminism of care that we haven't paid much attention to, that we could nurture. And so I would say that women could do with some paying attention to a feminism of care. Care for themselves, care for their relationships, care for what's beyond them, their children, and realize, I mean, there's nothing, when you meet someone who's had a baby, their life is so fulfilled that there's nothing that can fulfill a life like a baby for a woman. And for a man to be able to take care of a wife and a baby, there's nothing like that. Jordan said, in everything he's done, it's his family that is really the foundation and the stone that holds, that gives him his courage and strength. You know,
They often say that the family unit is the bedrock of society, in a way.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's true.
But it is, you know. Oh, it's so nice to be able to have a relationship where your husband comes home at night and is happy to be there because this is where he feels like he's taken care of. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I see. What do you see? What do you see as a way forward for young men? You're 31 years old.
Well, for young men, there has been a there's this notion that of course masculinity has been attacked, and I think a lot of people have been talking against this narrative that ambition and striving forwards and competition is bad. And of course there's this a lot of arguments have been made that it's wrong to attack it like from an absolute sense. Of course that there is a way that it could grow out of bounds and it might be destructive. But I do think that one of the central narratives of men in society is they have the power to destroy, but they also have the power to create. A lot of what we're plucking the fruits from at this moment is what men created. From the streets to the buildings to everything. And that's often by feminists, it's something that they criticize, right? That it's a man's world, and men have always done that to oppress and have the power. But I do not think that's the male ethos. In a sense, I think that the men eventually they have the power to create the society they want to nurture and protect their families at home. It's always, if you look at the good men in history, it's always to serve, right? It's to serve. Well, when we still believed in God, we served God, but we also served the family unit, and we served our mothers and our wives and our children. And maybe that's what's a piece that is missing from the male narrative, is you're not only to compete and to strive and to gain just because of you, but you do that because you can protect and provide, and you can serve your local community, but also your immediate family, because that's what it's all for. Well, I believe that's what it's all for. I do not believe it's just endless gaining and growing and extending your empire just for the sake of that. There has to be a deeper meaning than that. And I think that when you look at the men that have always carried their crosses and carried society, they did it to come home to their family and to serve them. And perhaps that's the missing piece that we're not telling our boys, right?
Right. Yeah. Yes, it is. It's service, right? That's what when a woman has a child, she finally has someone to serve, and it's a relief. I remember when I had my first baby, I was 31 years old, and I took my baby home to meet my husband's family, and it was such a relief to hand them my baby and not be the center of attention. I was the youngest in my family. I was the baby of the family. And then I had my own baby, and then I was no longer the baby. It was great.
No.
It was great.
And also, I do think, because there's this notion that we should depopulate, right? Since the Club of Rome. So one part is the male ethos should be to serve, but also you cannot be fully a man if you're not a father. I think
that's for sure. You know, did you watch that movie called The Birth Gap? Have you seen The Birth Gap?
No, not yet.
Well,
not yet.
That's a pretty disturbing film, because it shows the depopulation that's happening. You know, how many how many elderly people there's going to be, and there just aren't enough young people.
It's I think Elon Musk talked about this too. It's the gap we're facing, especially in Asia and other countries. It's immense. It's so big we cannot probably recover from it if we do not do something now, and then even it will be a hard hit. But I do think so, and I'm not entirely sure that's the full story, but as of now, I think that the male ethos is in part to service to others and to the highest, and to your wife and children. And I do think that you cannot be fully a man if you're not a father, because you do not understand what it is to be responsible for life, and especially your own. It's different. I'm not a father yet, so I am speaking from an intellectual bias and not from an experience bias, but I do believe it. I think you cannot be fully an adult if you do not know what it is to take care of a life.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure that's true. My son has 2 babies now, and he's going to be 30 in October, and he's a man now. You know, and he's young. He was my youngest. And you know, it's good. It's good. What he's doing is good. Every mother fails. Her son and her daughters, they grow up, and they're no longer their children. And that every successful woman fails. She has to fail, because she has to let her kids go and let them become who they're going to be.
Yeah, 100%. I think the idea that you cannot fail, or if you control everything, that you won't be able to fail, is like an inverse arrogance, right? It's like assuming that when you control everything, that they'll probably go the way you want. And if you look back, like, obviously the world doesn't work that way.
No.
And it's not good for your children.
No, it's not good for you, because it has to be their adventure, not yours. Right?
Yeah. So it's the way the world is going, the direction with, and perhaps we're trying to fill a void that we should be filling with the highest. But the whole Sustainable Development Goals, the globalist agenda, the WEF, right, it was kind of like a lobbyist club extension from the Social Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going in a direction that it doesn't look good. And I'm very happy that there are people like you, but also in my immediate environment, that are speaking out against this, and we need to steer away from it. And I hope that we can do it by the nick of our teeth, because if it goes wrong, which things tend to go wrong, we do not know the consequences.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're starting to see some of them. We're starting to see what we're doing to children. And that's about as obvious as you can get to realize your path is not correct.
Well, I have to say this, and I think it does instill a little bit of hope, is because of the controversies around the whole gender ideology and the normalizing of sexualizing kids in schools. There has been these uproar of parents that did not know this was going on, and it woke up so many parents of what is going on. And maybe, as you said, maybe this is the precursor of steering the ship back around.
Yeah.
Maybe it was necessary for people to really be shaken up. Okay, we're doing this to children. And I'll repeat, we're doing this to children. This has gone too far, and we should stop doing it. We should turn around. We should try and repair what damage we've caused, and should really think about the things that we're doing, and maybe also the things that we're believing, because what are we believing that we're teaching children? That whatever they choose in life, they can be without consequences. We know in life that your choices and what you believe have consequences. Mm-hmm. You can go on and on about this, but we should do some serious reflection of in what sorry state our society is in.
Yeah, and I think we are, because here we are talking, right? Yeah, right across the ocean.
The pond,
right
as they say.
The pond.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you've invited me, and I'm also very grateful that people are starting to talk about, and people are daring to leave behind their fears of stigma and reputation destruction, and they're saying, okay, there's something going wrong in the world. And I think that's more important than my position in the society right now, and it's more important than the consequences I'll face. And I'll fight for it. And perhaps that will be the fire that will spread and
yes.
Well, undo all the well, I wouldn't say toxic, but at least
misguided,
all the things that are going
trouble.
wrong. All
the misguided trouble, yeah. Well, I think... plug my computer in. There we go.
And also the delusion, right? Because a lot of people are deluded by the it's not truth exactly, because what they're doing is a lot of the belief narratives that are going around right now, they're based on partial truths. So a lot of the foundation is kind of true, but then the way out that they propose, that's not true. Yeah. But it's propagated as true because the underlying narrative is somewhat true. And for most people, it becomes really hard to discern between what is then true and what is not true.
Yeah, I think when you're getting to
And
a point
media
where
plays
it's confusing like that, then you know that you're not somewhere truthful, that the when it's indecisive or foggy, indeterminate, and all of that I think that, or it's, you know, like this gender stuff, it's weird. All of that is, I think, a sign. I think that's a sign of the devil. I think that's what that is. Because it's not, like, the devil isn't just bad, you know, obviously bad. That's not what it is.
It's not a rat man.
No, it's not. It's kind of teasy. It's kind of strange. It's a little... It just kind of makes you wonder what's going... That means that there's something amiss. That there's something that's gone off the path. It's just gone off the path. It's not true anymore. True means on the path, right?
Oh, yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, you know, they describe the devil as a trickster, and he deals in lies. So if it's not true, then the probability that it might be demonic or devilish is probably 100%.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it?
Probably.
Yeah, it does.
Tammy, I do not have the words to thank you, because it has been a real opportunity and a gift for you to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much.
To
It
be
was
able
a pleasure. My pleasure.
To be able to be sharing a few things. And I have to say, I speak a lot of people. I know a few people in Alberta, actually, in Edmonton, but also know a lot of Dutch people. And you do not have any idea how big your impact and your husband's impact and even Michaela's impact has been on young people. They've actually, it opened their eyes. They're researching more information themselves, and I just want to extend their thank you, and that's it.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And it's my pleasure, because, like I said, when I prayed to God, I said, I'm going to have courage and just say what I think, and also listen and learn. And that seems to be going all right so far.